Okay, so let me first thank the organizer for the invitation. So it's a pleasure to be here. Very nice atmosphere, it's good. A very nice excursion yesterday, so I really enjoyed it. So it's not easy to talk after Seamus, but I have to. And I will give you, not completely, a different perspective of the phase diagram of cuprate through a collaboration with my colleague and friend Louis Taillefer, where since now more than 12 years we are trying to study the phase diagram or the underlying ground state of cuprate by applying a high magnetic field. So I'm a senior researcher at the French High Magnetic Field Facility. And so there are two sites, one in Grenoble, which produce steady magnetic field up to 37 Tesla, and there is an IRE project to go up to 43 Tesla. But I'm working in the Toulouse site, where we produce pulse magnetic field, so the record is a little bit below 100 Tesla. We have different kind of magnets, so here I show you a photo of our capacitor bank. And so I will show you mainly some result obtained to the 90 Tesla. Collaboration, so I'd like to acknowledge my colleague in the Grenoble site, with whom I'm, so of course we are collaborating and working together, and in particular Marc-Henri Julien, who is performing NMR measurement in high magnetic field, and David Leboeuf, who is performing with me ultrasonic measurement in high magnetic field. And of course, I would like to acknowledge my colleague Louis from the University of Sherbrooke, but I will also show you a couple of results in collaboration of Nigel Halassi, Anthony Carrington, and Martin Brevel. And this is the list of collaborators here, in particular for samples, so in particular the UBC group and the Bernard Kammer group for the nice YBC compound. Okay, so as I told you, so I will give you a rather different perspective of the phase diagram obtained so at low temperature and in high magnetic field. And I'm going to start, let's say, slowly with an introduction on unconventional superconductor, and in particular discussing briefly the case of electron doped cuprate. Then I will switch to the main topic of my talk, which is hole doped cuprate, mainly YBCO. But and I will go through the different phases of the phase diagram. So you can find so this is a synopsis of review paper that has been published recently on the annual review of condensed matter physics this year. Okay, so let me start with the phase diagram. So you have seen that several times now. So this is temperature, hole doping, electron doping. So on both, for both hole and electron doped cuprate, so the parent compound is a Mott insulator. So Pablo yesterday gave a very good introduction to the subject. So basically, bond structure calculation predicts that you have one electron by unit cell, so it's a high field metal. But due to strong electron-electron correlation, in fact, the electrons are blocked on the copper side, and this is what we call a Mott insulator with an antiferromagnetic ground state. So this Mott insulator, or the physics of cuprate, is believed to be well described by this Hubbard model, where you have kinetic energy term and this repulsion, on-site repulsion term, which is believed to be more important on the hole doped side than for the electron doped side. So as you can see, so there are a few differences on these two phase diagrams. So first, you can see that the antiferromagnetic state extends to much higher doping for the electron compound than for the hole doped compound. The second main difference that is not clear on this phase diagram, but when you put the temperature, maximum temperature for hole doped cuprate of, for instance, YBCO, so you see that the superconducting transition is much higher for the hole doped cuprate. So in fact, it goes up to 133 Tesla for the 3 layer mercury compound. And the other main difference is that there is what we call a pseudo gap that you have heard before, state for the oil doped cuprate, whereas on the electron doped side, so you have a strong antiferromagnetic correlation which persists up to critical doping that I will discuss now. So I'm showing here a result or a phase diagram, temperature versus doping for electron doped cuprate obtained from neutron measurement by the group of Martin Raven on the NCCO compound. So in red here, what you see, so this is the antiferromagnetic multi-insulator states that extend up to 13%. And here in the color map, what you see is basically the correlation length of the antiferromagnetic fluctuation. The orange color so corresponds to a long distance antiferromagnetic fluctuation. And if you compare this antiferromagnetic fluctuation coherence length to the de Broglie correlation length of the electron, so you can notice that the antiferromagnetic correlation length is much longer than the de Broglie correlation length, meaning that in fact, even in this state here, so the electrons are still sensitive to antiferromagnetic fluctuation. And the phase diagram of electron doped cuprate are believed to be controlled by what we call a quantum critical point, which end in fact where the fluctuation ends. So this phase diagram is very reminiscent to the to other compounds like heavy fermions, organic conductor, or peptide. So basically, what you have you have a quantum order state, and which end at a critical doping, so called a quantum critical point at t equals 0. So, and around this point, so in many families, such as this one, so you can see unconventional superconductivity that appear. So, for instance, if you look to the peptide, which are one of the most, one of a very good example of that, so you have itinerant antiferromagnetism for the parallel compound. So, and when you dope, you see that the temperature of this antiferromagnetic spin density wave state so go down, and where the temperature should go to 0, you see this superconducting domes that appear where temperature can rise, can be as high as 50 Kelvin. And this superconducting dome is believed to be controlled by the quantum critical point due to antiferromagnetic fluctuation. So let me give you a few examples from an experimentalist point of view to what we observe close to the quantum critical point. So here I chose an example of the archetypal heavy fermion compound, cerium copper 6, which is an heavy fermion metal. The parallel compound here is a metal. And here I show you the resistivity versus temperature plotted as T square, where you see a hallmark of the Fermi liquid, meaning that the resistivity is T squared down to very low temperature. But as you can see in this state diagram, as soon as you dope this compound with gold, at 10% you see an antiferromagnetic order that appears. And when now you perform measurement of the resistivity at 10%, what you see is that the resistivity remains linear down to very low temperature, so as low as 10 millikelvin. So this is a signature from a transport point of view of the quantum critical point. If you now perform a specific heat in this compound, so there is a linear term for the parent compound, but as soon as you put gold, so at 10% gold as a quantum critical point, so the specific heat is diverged logarithmically, so the scale is logarithmic, meaning since the specific heat is proportional to the density of state, this means that the effective mass seems to diverge at this quantum critical point. Okay, and here I show you an example of a map of the coefficient of the electrical resistivity, plotted as a ρ0 plus coefficient T power epsilon. So epsilon equal 2, so meaning a family liquid when it's blue, and epsilon equal 1 in orange. And you see that this linear resistivity extends to T equals 0 only at the quantum critical. So what about meantime now? So there have been a lot of experiments showing that there is a divergence of the effective mass at the quantum critical point. And here I show you briefly a few examples how we can measure this. So this is resistivity measurement performed by the group of Analytis and in collaboration with Nigel Hersey, where when they measure, so coming from the right here, and approaching the quantum critical point, when they measure the A coefficient of the resistivity, you see that the B coefficient increases as you approach the quantum critical point. And from what we call the Kadowaki-Woods ratio, the A coefficient is proportional to the effective mass squared. So this is concomitant with the effective mass measured by specific heat and quantum oscillation, in particular by the group of Tony Carrington, where you see that around this 30% doping, and you see a strong enhancement of the specific heat or of the effective mass deduced from quantum oscillation. And finally, so this is the same picture emerged from penetration index measurement, which is also proportional to the effective mass. Okay, so this was a brief overview of what we do measure in conventional and unconventional superconductor. And now I would like to switch to the Hale-Bopp couplet. So this will be the roadmap. So you have seen this phase diagram several times now. Temperature versus Hale doping. So there are 4 different phases. 5 of which is the superconducting phase. So as I have discussed, so the parent compound is a Mott insulator, but this state is rapidly destabilized as you dope the compound. And so for YBCO at 5%, so this state disappears, and then you emerge so the superconducting dome here in dashed line. So in yellow you have the famous pseudo-gap phase. Inside the charge density wave phase that I will discuss, and in the strongly overdoped side you have the so-called Fermi liquid phase. So and I'm going now to discuss some results obtained by transport property measuring harmonic in the different phases. And this is our approach. Remove superconductivity with strong magnetic field where we can do it, because in YBCO around optimal doping here, so the critical field is believed to be 150 Tesla, so we cannot reach low temperature, but we can study the phase on both sides of this critical point. So let me start by the Fermi liquid phase, so the well-known where things are rather conventional. So this has been discussed, I believe, by Tony at the beginning of this school. And here I show you the resistivity plot, resistivity versus temperature for a strongly overdoped non-superconducting LSCO. And this is plotted versus T squared. And you see that the resistivity is beautifully T squared down to very low temperature, both in the plane and interplane direction. A second signature of Fermi liquid is the Willman-Franz law, and to do this measurement, what you have to do is measure the thermal conductivity and the electrical resistivity on the same sample with the same contact. And more than 15 years ago now, we have shown that this Willman-Franz law is beautifully satisfied in strongly overdoped radium-221, meaning that the electronic carrier of heat are also thermodynamic excitation of charge, so meaning that the current, electrical current is transported by the same charge and the thermal transport. Okay. In collaboration with the group of Nigel Hersey and Anthony Carrington, we have performed back in 2008 some quantum oscillation in this strongly overlapped thallium-201 compound. So I would like to recall that quantum oscillation are a consequence of Landau quantization of electrons in the magnetic field. It's a very powerful technique when you are able to observe them, because the frequency of the oscillation, which are periodic in 1/d, are directly related to the extremal area of the cyclotron orbit perpendicular to the magnetic field. So here I show a cartoon of the Fermi surface of thallium-201, where the warping has been exaggerated, but basically if you put a magnetic field along the axis of this 2D cylinder, the electron can make cyclotron orbit like this, and you will see a frequency, so some quantity like the resistivity or the magnetization oscillate with a frequency which is proportional to this area here. But this measurement can also give you information about the effective mass, as I told you before. So through the analysis of the amplitude of the oscillation, that's your temperature, and they also can tell you what we call the Dingle temperature, which is related to the elastic scattering rate at photon. Okay, so what can we say about this measurement in thallium-201? So we found a frequency of 18 kilotesla. So if you apply this Onsager relation, where the A key is the surface of the cylinder, and you convert it in KF, you find a KF which is around 7.4 nanometer minus 1, which is in very good agreement with what has been found by Arpes in the same compound with the same doping. So this represents 65% of the Brillouin zone. And now at 2D, you have the Luttinger theorem, which tells you that the density of carrier is directly related to the area of the Fermi surface, meaning to the frequency of the oscillation. And again, if you put the number, simple to do, you find a carrier density of 1.3 carrier per copper atom, which is exactly what is predicted by Born structure calculation. So I recall that the parent compound are half-filled metals, so even if it's a multi-operator, but you expect to have one electron for the parent compound, and this particular sample has a doping of 1.3, so 30%, meaning that you have 1 plus 1.3 carrier per copper atom. So this measurement shows that there is an excellent agreement between quantum oscillation, Arpes, but also Hall effect measurement and Born structure calculation. But so we found an effective mass which is around 5 times the free electron mass, and this shows that even in the strongly overlapped side, you still have strong electron-electron interaction. Okay, so let me go now to the strange, what called the strange metal phase, so the phase which is in between the pseudo gap and the Fermi liquid phase here, that has already been discussed. And here I would like to start to introduce what we call bad metal, strange metal, basically. So this has been discussed in this very nice review paper. So basically what you expect is, and this has been, as you see, measured, when you measure the resistivity at high temperature, so the scattering rate basically increase. But at some point, it cannot reach a limit, which is given by the bond theory, which tells you that the bond theory will break if the mean free path of your electron is smaller than the interatomic distance of your lattice. There is no point to think about quasi-particle in this limit. Basically, this leads to this famous criteria, KFL smaller than 1, means that you are not in the bond theory limit anymore. And indeed, if you measure some metals, what you see is that at high temperatures, the resistivity tends to saturate to a limit, so-called the Yoff-Moll-Krueger limit, corresponding to this criteria. and won't exceed it. Of course, in very good metal like copper, the resistivity is so low that you never reach this limit and the metal melt before actually the system. However, in cuprate and other strongly correlated electron systems, it has been shown that the resistivity exceeds the Yoav-Regel limit by a huge factor actually. And here, but as you can see, the resistivity continues to become metallic, meaning that it decreases as you decrease the temperature. And this has led to what we call incoherent transport or bad metal transport. Transport by incoherent quasi-particle. And this is subject still to intense research.
Can I raise a short question here? So, talking about calculated the Mayfair class in grade.
So you don't calculate directly the mean free path. So what you do is that you measure the resistivity.
Just the charge.
Yeah. And you assume you have to assume the density of current. So in cuprate here, so this is one of the first measurement of high temperature resistivity measurement in BISCO, overdot BISCO 2201. Resistivity plotted as temperature up to 700 Kelvin, and as you can see, the resistivity remains so linear in temperature between TC and 700 Kelvin, which is something which is totally unusual. Of course, in metal, you expect to have the resistivity linear at high temperature due to electron phonon scattering, but this should change to another close to T-square, at least a T-square regime at low temperature, or to another regime. But so there is no regular case to understand this linear resistivity at high temperature within an electron phonon model. So we have recently done some measurements so in this tranche metal phase, but now at low temperature by applying a magnetic field to quench superconductivity. So we have done this in the now BISCO, the two-layer BISCO 2212 compound, and we have also compiled in this paper so some results obtained in different families of cuprate. So namely LSCO. So this is work done in collaboration with Nigel Lucy 10 years ago. In MDLSCO, so this is the transport measurement done by the group of Rita, and in some electron doped cuprate, LCCO and PCCO. And all these compounds, so the doping of all these compounds lie so are above the critical point of the dots. They are overdoped and in this red circle here. And as you can see, so all the measurements show linear resistivity down to low temperature when you apply a magnetic field. And what we have done in this paper actually is that we have followed a current idea of what we call the Planckian dissipation that has been introduced by Jan Zeman back in 2004. And there is a very beautiful experimental paper by the group of Andy Mackenzie where they have compiled a lot of results on different strongly correlated electron systems, showing that, proposing that the strength of the T-linear resistivity is given by a scattering rate that has a universal value, namely so a scattering rate proportional to cavity. And if you assume that, and you plug that in the Joule formula, and since we are at T equals, close to T equals 0, so we assume that we can use this formula to deduce some parameter. So, and if you have a T-linear resistivity, and you can write the resistivity as ρ0 plus A1 coefficient times T. And so you replace the scattering rate by cavity. You basically arrive to a formula where the A1 coefficient can be written like this. With alpha is the ratio between this, so alpha equals 1 basically when you have the Planckian dissipation limit. And what we have done is that we have compiled a lot of two number in terms of the Ewan square coefficient to basically compare different family of cuprate. So this is just A1 divided by the c-axis, so the distance between copper oxygen plane to normalize the number. And basically, so this coefficient is inversely proportional to the Fermi temperature, which is basically given by the ratio of the density of carrier divided by the effective mass. So if you know, if you can plug the density of carrier and the effective mass in this formula, basically we can evaluate this coefficient and compare it to the experimental value in particular, so get this alpha coefficient. So since we are in this strongly, in this overlap region above P star, where we believe that the Fermi surface reconstruction, so the Fermi surface is now given by bond structure calculation, and given by 1 plus P or 1 minus P depending on the family. Basically, the only parameters that we have to put is effective mass. And the effective mass, so the case is very compelling for the electron doped cuprate because both quantum oscillation, so that is to say density of carrier, and effective mass, so has been measured directly experimentally. So and here in this table that you can find in this paper, so we have compiled the density of carrier, the effective mass, so here measured by quantum oscillation. For the hot doped cuprate, so we have deduced effective mass from specific heat measurement. And basically, if you look to the alpha coefficient, so the alpha equal 1 for the Planck anticipation, you see that this is almost 1 plus or minus 30-40% depending on the family. For all, so the family that we have to, meaning that this Planck anticipation seems to be, for some reason that seems to theorists needs to work, a fundamental and universal principle. That seems that the T-linear resistivity appear when the scattering rate hits this quantum limit, and whatever the scattering process, and you have to keep in mind that what scatter may also pair, so this can be also a link to the high temperature superconductor.
Cyril?
Yeah?
In your estimate, you would reach with temperature the Mottioff-Radel limit when the temperature is comparable to the Fermi temperature.
Mm-hmm.
You went back, right? So the sheet resistance would be, or conductance would be E squared over H when T is equals TF.
Yeah.
Should I take this TF really literally as the Fermi temperature of that system?
That's what we have done, actually.
But we do know that experimentally the resistivity reaches the Mottioff-Radel limit, or even surpasses it. But I always thought that the Fermi energies in these systems are larger than 200 Kelvin.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking whether this is a concept.
Okay, so I was a bit quick on this part, so yeah. What you have to notice is that we already concentrate on the low temperature part, on the slope of the resistivity at low temperature. Actually, for this compound, so I show this at the beginning because this is really the hallmark of...
Perfectly okay, yeah. But if I take it literally, we do know that these systems surpass have a sheet resistant P squared
at high temperature. But here already the incoherent bad metal regime that we have at high temperature is not the one that I'm discussing here at low temperature.
So are you saying that there is a low temperature slope and then the high temperature behavior is completely different?
Yeah, not completely, but for this compound it does not be, the linearity does not survive up to very high temperature.
On the overload side?
On the overload side.
Okay.
I see. Okay.
So we really concentrate on the low temperature.
So you're always smaller than your TF?
Yeah. Okay. So let me now so go to the main topic of my talk, that is on the pseudogap phase. So I will mainly discuss now YBCO. And So let me give a definition of the pseudo gap. So this has been discovered, this phase has been discovered by NMR measurement. And here I show you the night shift versus temperature in YBCO compound, where you see, so the night shift basically measures the density of state of a metal. So for a metal, of course, it should be completely flat in temperature. For a superconductor, the density of state should go down at Tc. But here, so Tc is approximately here for this compound, and what you see is that the night shift so show a strong downturn at a temperature called T star, which represents this line here. So a spectroscopic definition of the pseudo gap is from Harper's measurement a partial suppression of the low energy excitation. And here I show you Harper's measurement, where so the bond structure calculation Fermi surface is in red here. So this is a large hole cylinder, and what they see is that when you enter the pseudo gap phase, so the state at the antinode disappear. Basically, there is a collapse of the Fermi surface at T star, and this cartoon here show you what happened, what is believed to happen versus temperature. So you have the large hole-like cylinder at high temperature, and when you cross T star, so this state at the antinode disappear, leaving Fermi gap, which become point in the superconducting state, so with the D-wave signal. And whether this pseudo gap phase is a doped Mott insulator or a phase with a distant order parameter is still a matter of debate. So as already highlighted by Seamus, so the one particularity of the pseudo gap is that it hosts a variety of quantum order. And here I show you a phase diagram adapted from this paper, where they put anomaly detected by different probes, so at the T star transition temperature. So there are among these quantum orders, so several has been discussed, like the nematic quantum order. So where you have, so it's a rotational symmetry breaking. There is from a neutron measurement, some claim that this phase corresponds to a current loop, an intra-unit cell current loop antiferromagnetic phase. So this is the model of Varma. But these two models are compared to other Q equals 0 order, meaning that there is no opening of a gap. And this cannot explain directly why we see this phenomena that I have discussed before, so a partial opening of the gap of the antinode. But of course, this instability of the pseudo gap can boost TC, so this has been discussed by many theorists. But in my talk, so I will focus on, in fact, so Q different of 0 order, so like the charge density wave state. And at the end, I will discuss a little bit about the spin density wave. So what about charge density wave? So you have heard the talk of Seamus before, so it's this has been discussed since a long time in cuprate. Discovered through the form of what we call sprite order. So this is an interqueen, so this is both charge and spin density wave modulation. This has been seen in neutron back in 1995. Then charge modulation has been discovered by STM in the Seamus group in the PCB-based cuprate. And in YBCO, so charge density wave, the discovery of charge density wave has been triggered by the discovery of quantum oscillation 12 years ago in collaboration, so in my lab in collaboration with Louis Taillefer. And here, now, so I will discuss YBCO, so underdrop YBCO. And I would like to start to compare quantum oscillation measurement on both sides of the phase diagram. So I present you before the quantum oscillation in overlap thallium 2201 with a frequency of high frequency of 18 kilotesla, a carrier density of 1 plus P. And here I show you quantum oscillation measurement in YBCO, but also in the one layer mercury compound, 120, 1. And in both compounds, the frequency of the oscillation is very small compared to what we have found in other Doctarium 201. Namely, for YBCO, the frequency is around 500 Tesla, which only correspond to 2% of the first Brillouin zone compared to 65% for the other Doctarium 201. So this measurement show you that there is a drastic change of the Fermi surface topology on both sides of the phase diagram. So several teams, of course, and in different field facility have some measurement. And here I show you doppling dependence of the frequency from the work of Ward-Ramshaw, and so data coming from different measurements, including hours. So you see that the frequency slightly increased versus doping. So first it has been only observed, the quantum oscillation has been observed only between 9% and 15%. And you see that the frequency slightly increased, but not much compared to the frequency of observed in overdub compound. The mass, the effective mass deduced from this oscillation seems to diverge, or at least show a strong increase at two critical points. One around 8%, so this is measurement from Suchitra Sébastien and collaborator. And another critical point, so which can be the critical point of the charge density wave, as we will discuss after, or the critical point of the pseudo gap. But so on both sides of the phase diagram, basically the effective mass increases. So here what I show, be careful, so this is 1/n. Okay? So meaning that when the sample goes to 0, the effective mass decreases.
Sorry, this effective mass is compared with the electron mass or compared with the some DFT?
No, so this is electron mass. So it takes into account interaction.
Sorry?
It takes into account electron.
No, I mean, sorry, I mean M0, the one that you take as a reference.
So this is the free electron
The
mass.
free electron mass.
Yeah, not the bond mass, sorry.
So Cyril, you had said that on the overdub side you already saw a mass enhancement of 5.
Yes.
But here you're thinking 5 is like a divergence. I'm just wondering.
It's a divergence. So it's what you see is a strong increase, which is reminiscent to what happened when you arrive close to a continuous critical point.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the message basically that I will discuss after. But I agree that it's, let's call it, so there is an increase by the factor 2 of the effective mass when you approach such. Unfortunately, you cannot measure quantum oscillation about the doping because critical fields will become too important. Okay. So another transport property that has been very important for charge density wave is Hall effect measurement. And what we have shown actually is when you enter the charge density wave phase, the Hall coefficient become negative. So here, so this is the Hall coefficient versus magnetic field measured at low temperature. So at 3 different doping. So at this doping, which we are slightly outside of the charge density wave, and you see that as soon as you go inside the charge density wave, the Hall coefficient will become strongly negative. So here I show Hall coefficient versus temperature, now for two compounds, not only so YBCO, but also the mercury 1201. So there is the same phenomenology. So basically the Hall coefficient is positive at high temperature, but below a certain temperature, so you see that it becomes strongly negative. And the fact that you have a Hall coefficient that is negative means that you have an electron pocket in the Fermi surface. An electron pocket in the Fermi surface of all dot cuprate means that somewhere you have a Fermi surface reconstruction. And at this time, so we call it a Fermi surface reconstruction, but by some sort of hidden order. And this hidden order has been discovered by my colleague Marc-Henri Julien by performing NMR measurement in the same under YBCO, where basically they show that there is a splitting of a particular NMR line, observed only in high magnetic field and below a certain temperature. There is no spin order, meaning that this is not a stripe order as it has been discovered in the LSAO family. So here I show the splitting of this line versus temperature. So you see that you observe it only below 50 Kelvin at high magnetic field. And so this splitting, so this charge density wave, so appear above a strict field. So you need to be basically above 18 Tesla at this particular doping to start to see charge density wave. Of course, after this discovery by the NMR, so several group, X-ray group has performed a lot of tsunami of measurement. I'm not going to discuss that because Bernard will give a talk on that this afternoon. But the bottom line of all this measurement is that in YBCO, again I'm already talking on YBCO, in fact there are two types of charge density wave. The one discovered by NMR where we see quantum oscillation, which is a long range 3D meaning in terms of along the z-axis charge density wave. So this charge density wave has a modulation which is unidirectional. So this is long range, observed only above a certain field. And at a higher temperature, so basically between TC and T star, so X-ray measurement has shown the presence of what we call a 2D charge density wave, meaning that the correlation length along the axis is very small. So this 2D charge density wave has bidirectional modulation and is observed at zero magnetic field. So I'm not going to discuss that because my time is running out. And I would say that the current idea proposal of how to reconcile charge density wave with an electron pocket so has been discussed phenomenologically by Neil Harrison and Suchitra Sebastian. Basically, this charge density wave, so this Fermi surface reconstruction appear in two steps. First, you open a pseudo gap at the antinode. Otherwise, actually, if you fold the Fermi surface, you will have too much pocket, and to explain the density of state measured by specific heat. And in the pseudo gap, from this pseudo gap Fermi surface, which is either hard, also small pocket, you fold them with the bidirectional charge density wave vector, so along Kx and Ky. So this Fermi arc become here a small electron pocket.
Question. So where does the gap of the CDW open?
Actually, this is a good question because the gap, as I put here, so this is not a conventional CDW where you see clearly a gap. But it has been seen recently by Raman scattering. And this is not a nested, so this is not a nesting conventional charge density wave. It's certainly driven by strong electron correlation. And but as far as I know, we heard in your talk that you are pushing to prove that this is not a conventional charge density wave, but a pair density wave state. But for the moment, there is no convincing evidence in YBCO, but this is okay. I'm not claiming this model has some limit actually, and it does not explain all the experiment. This is the way, but this is the model that at least potentially explain most of the experimental observation, but not all. So, okay. Let me go now a bit further outside of this charge density wave. So I would like to come back to Hall effect measurement. And as I told you, so the negative sign of the Hall effect is the signature of the Fermi surface reconstruction by the charge density wave. So here I show you again Hall coefficient versus temperature, measure of course at high magnetic field. So at a different doping level inside the charge density wave phase. And the latest measurement that we have performed at much higher magnetic field, so actually up to 88 Tesla, show that at 16% now the Hall effect remains positive up to say 40 Kelvin. And what we have inferred from this measurement is that the critical point of the pseudo-gap and of the charge density wave are distant. And it seems from this measurement, and as we have drawn this diagram, that the charge density wave is in fact an instability of the pseudo-gap. And the critical point of the charge density wave has been also confirmed by high-field sound velocity measurements that we have performed with my colleague David Leboeuf in this paper. So when we have seen this result in the 16% sample, YBCO sample, so we have decided to go and to make some measurement through P-star, critical point of the pseudo-gap. So of course, as I say, the critical field in this doping range is high, so we don't have very low temperature measurement, but basically here I show you some Hall effect measurement versus magnetic field up to 80 Tesla at 50K. And what you can see that so the Hall effect remain positive at all this doping, so from 16 up to 20%. So P-star is believed to be 19% in YBCO. And if you now naively translate the Hall coefficient in terms of carrier density, like done in basic condensed matter book, and you plot the carrier density, the Hall carrier density, versus doping. So this curve here translates directly to this 4 point here. And what you can see from this graph is that at low doping, as we know from previous measurements, so the carrier density is given by P, the number, so the doping. Whereas we know that at very high doping level, I showed you before, strongly overdoped thallium 201, the carrier density is 1 plus P. And the transition from 1 plus P to P seems to appear at the critical point of the pseudo-gap, meaning that the pseudo-gap corresponds to a sharp drop. So this is a factor 6. It's really a sharp and strong drop of the carrier density from the two limit here, 1 plus P and P. And this measurement actually has been also confirmed shortly after in the ND LSCO compound. Okay, so let me now just try to put in context a few experimental measurements and ask the question, so does the pseudo-gap correspond to a quantum critical point? So do we have quantum criticality in the hold-up phase diagram? So I showed you before the T-linear resistivity of different overdop compound with the scattering rate given by the Planckian dissipation. And so as in the archetypal quantum critical system, so the resistivity is linear, but in a way that we have called 10 years ago anomalous quantum criticality, in the sense that in the heavy valence system I showed you before, so the resistivity remains linear down to very low temperature only at the quantum critical point. Whereas in LSCO, so here I show you again a map so of the exponent of the temperature dependent of the resistivity. In red, so this is 1. In blue, this is 2. And you see that the resistivity remains linear over a broad range of doping at low temperature.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Back to the LSU data, what were the dash lines?
Good question. Is it TC? I think it's TC. I don't remember. Sorry.
There were 3 dash lines.
So this is what we believe to be the T-star line in LSCO. So this is the critical point of LSCO. I think this is TC. This one I don't remember. I should go back. Sorry. Okay, so now let me discuss some some measurement obtained by the group of Louis Taillefer and Thierry Klein and Christophe Marcelin in Grenoble, where they measure specific heat in the LSCO family, so mainly in ND-LSCO and European LSCO. So here the good point with this compound is that TC is low, HC2 is small, and they can easily measure in the normal state across actually the whole phase diagram. And here I show you so the specific heat divided by T versus doping, so the different color correspond to the different family. And what you see is that there is seems to be a divergence of the electronic specific heat coefficient at the critical point of these two compounds, which seems to increase as you lower the temperature. So again, the electronic coefficient of the specific heat is related to density of state, so the effective mass. So this seems to point a divergence of the effective mass at the critical point of the observer. In addition, so when you look to the temperature dependence of the electronic specific heat for this European LSCO, so this is plotted again in a logarithmic scale. You see that at the critical point of the pseudogap, so there is so specific heat behave as log 1/T, as again you expect for quantum critical point.
Sorry, one question. This is just the electronic specific heat, even at 10 Kelvin.
Yeah.
So phonons have been subtracted.
Phonon in Schottky anomaly.
And Schottky.
So basically, actually, what they did is that they have sampled from the same grower at different doping, and they subtract all the curve compared to a sample where it's believed to. So they are very far from the quantum. So this is the subtraction with the reference sample.
So it's a sort of differential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Subtraction.
Yeah.
The slope of the logarithm for these two values, 24 and 21, so the coefficient seems to be different.
Yeah, that's true. But
which is not what you, for example, see in the heavy fermion systems from Löhneisen, which you referred to earlier. There you have a constant slope, and then it peels off.
That's true.
And at high temperatures, it has that one quantum critical phase with a constant slope. Is there something, how serious should we take this change in slope?
No, you are very true. So I was going actually maybe to answer to your question, because
okay, very good.
Not yet your question, but it seems that we observe classical signature of quantum critical point. But as I say, for the resistivity, so there is an anomalous range of doping where linear resistivity is observed. As you point out in, so the slope should, so at the critical point it should remain logarithmic down to very low temperature, right. But as soon as you are away from the quantum critical point, this should come back to a more family liquid-like behavior, yeah. Which is not the case here, you are right. So in fact, there is classical signature of quantum critical point, but a diverging length scale in all the equating series. So the best example, of course, is the heavy fermion system, where the antiferromagnetic correlation lengths diverge at the quantum critical point.
I mean, the 21% data could well peel off and go to a constant value because the dashed line, I suspect, are not data.
No, they are not data.
But what my worry was actually that when I do see logarithmic behavior at higher temperatures, the coefficient is a different one.
Yeah. So where can come from this quantum critical behavior? So some people will argue that it can come from remanent antiferromagnetism that has not been observed so far in lots of Q-rate. In particular, I guess that Steve Hagen this afternoon will talk about spin fluctuation and shows that the correlation, antiferromagnetic correlation length at optimal doping is very small, it's 1 unit cell. But to finish, I would like to just flash some measurement performed. I collaborate, of course, but this measurement has been linked by my colleague Marc-Henri Julien and David Leboeuf in Grenoble. So they perform NMR in tandem, NMR and ultrasound in LSCO. So I'm now switching to LSCO. And it is well known in LSCO that around 12%, so there is a stripe-like phase with glassy antiferromagnetic phase at zero magnetic field. And in fact, what they discovered by performing NMR up to 45 Tesla, and David performed some ultrasound up to 90 Tesla, what they discover is that this magnetism actually extends up to P star when you put a strong magnetic field to quench superconductivity. And they of course done some measurement above P star where there is no more magnetism. This magnetism is really glass-like freezing of incommensurate antiferromagnetic correlations. It's not purely an antiferromagnetic order, it's glassy. But this discovery may explain this kind of behavior.
Does it become less glassy under magnetic field? In whatever way that glassy existing particle?
Glassy is defined in the fact that it's not well ordered, you don't have sharp transition, and they basically, they cannot yet perform an NMR measurement in pulse magnetic field. It's possible, but very hard, very difficult in Q-rate. So basically, they measure a sample where it's well known, and they make a parallel between NMR, which is maximum of the 1/T1 at the glassy transition, which corresponds to a minimum in the sound velocity measurement actually. And after that, the sound velocity has been performed because we can perform sound velocity in pulse magnetic field, and this minimum extend up to this point.
So then those data points are not directly measurement of magnetism?
No. It's a correlation between the NMR and ultrasound. But this minimum here is what you exactly expect in conventional glassy-like system. What has been measured in 2030.
Do you happen to know whether the signal disappears at the maximum of 1/T1? The NMR signal, the so-called wipeout effect.
Yes.
Is this what happens here?
Should ask Mark.
Okay.
Not an NMR. I just want to flash this as a last slide to just conclude, and I think I will let you read. Thank you very much.
Questions? Students, please come. Yes.
Could you go back to the introduction where you show the nib type? And yes, here. And here the resistivity is not linear in T.
It is linear in T only at the critical point. In fact, you have, I should have said that actually, it's back from. So you see, in conventional system, what you expect to have a fan like this. So the linear resistivity extends down to T equals 0 only at the quantum critical point. And if you are above the quantum critical point, you will see. So there is a fan, so you will see a linear resistivity at high temperature, but at some point, what we call the coherence temperature, there is a crossover to a T-square resistivity. But this T-square resistivity, sorry, so you can measure the A coefficient of the resistivity, which is linked to the M square. And this A coefficient you see seems to diverge as you approach the
So it's fitted with a limited temperature.
Yeah.
Right?
And
That is not the same material as the diagram before, right? The value one.
yeah.
And another question about the Planckian dissipation. So this means that for one specific doping, you should have no sample dependence in the coefficient of the linear coefficient of resistivity. Is this observed? Is it experimental?
What do you mean?
There's no, the A1 here does not have a dependence on sample quality.
No.
So
But this A1 is basically, if you put this, if you assume Planckian dissipation limit, and you work with the group formula, this A1 coefficient is given basically by the ratio of M star over N. And M is changing with doping.
but if you fix the doping, you should have always the same coefficient.
Which is the case. So this is the slope. A1 is the slope
So
of
it's
the.
experimentally observed.
Yeah, certainly I went too quick on this. So A1 is really, so I take the slope here of the resistivity versus temperature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at a particular doping, of course.
But can you make samples with the same doping in different qualities?
This is the question.
Okay. Of course we can. And we have experimental. I need to think and come back to the graphic, but I'm practically sure that this linear slope won't change with dissolving. But it changes a lot with, you see, the slope change a lot with doping.
Other questions? Yes.
So again, how do you determine that the graph and the charge wave critical points were different?
So it's from Hall effect measurement, okay? From Hall effect measurement, so we see that the charge density wave, so the signature of charge density wave is a negative Hall effect coefficient. And in fact, when you go above 15%, you measure Hall effect, so the Hall effect remains positive down to the lowest temperature that we have reached. But actually we have reached, so here I show only measurement down to 40 Kelvin, but for some doping we succeed to go down to 20 Kelvin, but you see the Hall effect at low temperature remains positive. There is no sign of any curvature and negative Hall coefficient. And this is just, so this is not a direct proof, if you like, it's just a transport signature by this charge density wave. Charge density wave mean reconstruction of the Fermi surface, mean electron pocket. Mean, so this is how we measure.
Other questions? Students, postdocs, no more questions? Everything crystal clear? There's going to be a test. Hi, Hugo.
First.
Yeah, hi, Hugo. Yeah.
So concerning this heat capacity peak at the quantitative point, in the overdose side, I have no comment. Yeah, it's several centimeters, but it's I mean, data looks very like that. But for the underdose side, we don't have a from a p plus 1 suddenly changed to 1 plus IP. So I mean, these steps just coincide here. So the left-hand side has some influence from that. I mean, the sharp step. So in that case, the Fermi surface suddenly changes. That is not only the mass.
But at 2D, what you measure here in theory,
Yeah. I mean, this
it's,
kind of a,
it's just the density of state. And at 2D, what you measure here is just the density of state. And at 2D, the density of state is just M star.
just to state. That's true, but it's coincided with the sudden change from
Yes.
P to 1 plus P. So that's, I mean, these are two things.
Completely different. We are talking about
Yeah,
the
it's
change of the
different,
density
but
of state, which is concomitant with the change in the carrier density. But they are two
I just
different.
want to know whether this left-hand side, surging up this part, has some influence from the transition of that P changing to 1 plus P, that's a sudden step.
I guess that they are related, say,
Or they're related, but the firm surface does not, does change a lot. So
Yeah.
that means you say that here is some kind of a effective mass diverging, then if the firm surface is changing, then how can we format these two?
no, but it's a good question. No matter what.
You, okay, okay.
There are other questions? Yes.
I have a question to Seamus that was prompted by Cyril's talk. I don't know what the procedure is. Can I ask it?
Ask it.
Organizer says yes, so.
So what is the question?
The question is, when you have a pair density wave state that gives you a lobe of low energy excitation that looks like an electron pocket,
Yeah.
if I then put on a vector potential to look at magneto oscillations, it's the excitations are Bogoliubov excitations and not charged electrons.
Yeah.
Is it clear that there will be the same magneto oscillations in that system?
No, it's not clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
That's a very important question for theorists to answer.
Yeah, but I want to first know that it's clear.
so what is
Yeah.
not clear also is the temperature dependence of the quantum oscillation. So Suchitra shows that it follows beautifully the Lipschitz-Clausewitz formula in the water temperature.
That's a related question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I
So
want to.
let me just say this to amplify the question I asked Cyril earlier. If you want a two-stage process to create the electron pocket, and you need two gaps to open, one is the pseudo gap and one is the CDW gap, I don't know if there's any evidence that that happens in the cuprates. There's plenty of evidence that one gap opens, but I don't know if there's any evidence that two gaps open.
That's true.
Herman had a question.
Yeah, I have to, I just look at this graph and it's a bit confusing, right? Because at 10 Kelvin, the three curves should coincide, right? Am I right? Because you are, there you are putting the gamma value at 10 Kelvin and 0.5 Kelvin. You are at 0.1.
So this is not my data, so let me see. So why the 2 points should coincide? So this is a difference. So here, be careful. So this is really the raw data. So what they measure versus temperature, and here I think it's the subtraction that I was discussing with you. It's maybe I was not involved in this. Just to highlight. So there is discussion on quantum criticality. So if there is quantum criticality, we have clear signature in conventional quantum critical system. So there are signature, but as we have discussed here, so it's not as robust as in conventional quantum critical system. But I want to, this is important to measure, I think. Actually, this is the first thermodynamic signature of quantum criticality. Can calculate this in Cupid. This is why I also want to highlight this.
And then I have a question about the antiferromagnetic liquid.
Glass, yeah, the measurement.
Spin glass, or glass. So do you imagine this as, do you imagine the fluctuations there in time or in space, or can you say something about that?
No, but actually, this is a freezing of this. So what they measure is the freezing of this.
So it's
Really
really in
anti-ferromagnetic.
there is no time fluctuation.
I think it's in spectrum.
So are those units really seconds to the -1? Is it really that slow?
Ask Marco.
That's amazing.
But I guess it's at the Trinity.
Other questions? If not, I have a question. The specific heat measurement and going back to your resistivity measurement of LSU, those are similar systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, if you go back to your resistivity measurement,
So which one?
the linear, yeah, that one, right. So, then for LSO, this T-linear resistivity doesn't seem to, I don't know, does it not care about the quantum critical point, or?
So actually, what we have discussed in our Planckian paper is to explain the broad range of linear resistivity. Is to assume that you have the Planckian dissipation limit. Okay, and if so, the slope of your linear resistivity depends on the effective mass, and this explains why the slope increases as you underdot because the mass increases. In this scenario, there is no
So in other words, the data is consistent with Planckian distribution perspective,
yeah,
but what is causing Planckian distribution
we don't know.
is not clear.
No, it's not clear.
And it's clearly not, it doesn't seem to be just, I have quantum critical point and magically.
That's what I'm trying to.
Those two are not necessarily
that's why I try to
causal relation.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Thank you.
There aren't any more questions. Thanks, Cyril, and